the Trinity we talk about, the three we talk about, they're not persons. There was nobody named Osiris. There might have been some dude named Osiris, you know. There may have been some sister named Aset. But there was no first God. Just get away from the white man's myth of reality, you know. You can't even imagine the first anything. It is beyond your capabilities. Well, you know, in the African culture, we see from the beginning, and sometimes I see my brothers and sisters misinterpret the symbol of Asar, Aset, and Haru, because they're so busy trying to rationalize this relationship to Christianity and Jesus and so forth. Well, I'm not trying to do that. The Africans were trying to make a statement. In every society, you have a literate population, meaning those who have a body of knowledge, have an understanding of it, and deliberately went to do that. Then you have the majority, which is an illiterate population that don't have that body of knowledge about certain specific things. They may have body of knowledge about their specialty. I'm an agriculturalist, I'm a farmer, I'm an agronomist, I'm a person who attends the fruit trees, I run a linen, I have a linen operation, I have a cotton field, I'm planting maize. And so they don't have time for all of this other stuff, but they need to have that knowledge. So that's where they're willing to pay somebody. And symbolically, you're the priest or the scientist, and we give you a place to live and we give you food to eat. You don't have to work and do that. We do that for you and revere you, but you have to get this knowledge for us so we understand the ecology around us and about us and how we fit in it, and understand the cosmology and how we fit in it. You do that for us, we feed, clothe, and house you, because we got to do the things that feed and clothe the whole society. Explaining yourself to yourself. Everything you know about God comes from the mind and the mouth of a man or a woman. It didn't drop out of the sky, right? We're explaining our function to ourselves and looking for the motives, force behind that function. And this thing of calling Set evil and the devil, wrong. There's a particular statue of Ramses III in his most pristine posture. And he has Seth on one side and Haru on one side. That's the balance. You got to have both. The thing is, one can't outweigh the other. That's yin and yang. That's cause and effects, the fundamental law of nature. Not evil. It only becomes evil if you're too much in any one side. If you're too much in the Haru side, you're evil. If you're too much in the Set side, you're evil. That tug of war, that cause and effect, that law of opposites in nature is what the story is really about. Now we have to anthropomorphize the story when we make them men and use animal heads, but that's a way to tell a story to the non-literate population about your understanding of how things work in the universe. Said it wasn't a guy running around doing nothing. Okay? It's the guy is a symbol of a process in nature. When a woman gives birth, it's because the egg that is produced in her meets the sperm that's produced by her opposite in nature. And they create by recreating themselves as themselves. That's the child. That must be constantly repeated in order for life to continue. All right? But it can only happen when Set and Haru amalgamates. When you start putting gender on them, you're making a mistake. Same thing white people do. That's why you walk around Africa, they just as soon to call you a he as a she, depending on the time of day and how old the person is. And they don't mean it to have anything to do with gender. It has to do with the function. What was the function? It has nothing to do with gay, none of that foolishness white folks trying to make it mean. Without a Haru, there's no functioning Set. Without a Set, there's no Haru. They are complementary opposites. They're cause and effect that makes nature work. And so we have to be careful not to try to speak them into Western conceptualization of reality. Speak them into scientific base understanding of our reality, you know? And so you end up then getting the male and the female, but they're not complete until they carry out the function of unification, which then repeats. When it creates, it repeats itself. It just created itself. That's what our ancestors are calling God. Not either one of the three elements, but the three elements together is what they constantly tell us. Family is the foundation of civilization. You want to build anything, you got to build a family. You can't build a family, you're not going to build a civilization. Okay? And a civilization is what? A human replica of the universe. That's what it should be. And that's why Kemet is so beautiful, because it became closer than any other coming together of human beings in the history that we know, of replicating the function of the universe as the function of those of us who live in the universe. We were imitating the universe. And when we do it right, harmony is the result. When we do it wrong, chaos is the result. Chaos is just as important as harmony, because chaos told you, you messed up. You got it wrong. You need to get it right. You know what I'm saying? It ain't that chaos ain't telling you, oh, it's cool, you're all right. It's telling you all right to keep you from getting it right. It's the chaos that tells you to go back to, like they say in the theater. When you're in the theater, something goes wrong, they say, go to black. I mean, turn off all the lights. We're going to start this all over again. With nobody having no more vision than the other one on what's the next step going to be. The Trinity we talk about, the three we talk about, they're not persons. There was nobody named Osiris. There might have been some dude named Osiris, you know. There may have been some sister named Aset. But there was no first God. Just get away from the white man's myth of reality, you know. You can't even imagine the first anything. It is beyond your capabilities, you know. What Osiris is symbolic of is that which carries the essence of divinity that needs to be emulated by all of us. But he isn't the first. He doesn't exist. He's a mythical character developed by the wisdom minds as a teaching tool to represent concept, ideas, and principles that needs to come and play in your life. And you create a dramatic or a drama to show you what happens when it doesn't come into play and what happens when it comes into play. Now, what are you going to stand for? You know, how you going to work this? That's a myth. The African society is not structured around the woman. That's the myth that black folks who've been around white folks too long have brought into trying to explain our tradition. And that is what you would call matriarchal. Ain't no woman having a baby without a man. So let's get it straight. The symbol of God is not a man, it's not a woman, it's the family. You know, get it straight. The Trinity has nothing to do with a particular man, a particular woman, or a particular child. It has to do with the process of recreation. Okay? And so in Africa, this is matrifocal. And it's easy to understand. Mama's baby, daddy's maybe. Okay? If you're going to understand the bloodline, you have to trace it through the woman, not through the man. Because we may drop a sperm, but we can't show who dropped the sperm before us or after us. And so you can be assured that what comes out of that woman's womb belongs to that woman. And so it's through that way you trace the lineage of the family. And that way you trace the lineage of the royalty, of those who are proclaimed royalty, based on spiritual reasons in almost all cases. And so that's what I meant by matrifocal. So take Ghana, for instance, and take the Ashanti nation. The king is called the Asantehene. And he derives on that throne, not from his mother's womb or his father who's the king, because that will cause too much disruption. That will lead to envy and jealousy and fighting between the brothers who are going to take the throne. So the next king is going to come from one of the sisters of the king. But nobody knows who that is, because they will train all the children to be the one. Only when the time comes will the best of all the children be chosen by the women and then recommended and sent to the men to be raised to be the king of those people. That's matrifocal. And in Africa, the woman has the power of the throne. And this has always been the case. The throne symbolized the power of the community. So going back all the way to Kemet, what's sitting on the head of a Set? The throne, the chair, meaning the power. But she gives that to the man in form of the authority. The woman of the community said, we got the power, but we have to raise the next generation. So we're going to give you the authority to run the social order. Matrifocal. That's matrifocal. The woman represents the power in Africa. The man represents the authority in Africa. That authority is granted to you by the woman because the woman have a responsibility with her power to recreate the next generation. It's disrupted extraordinarily, but it's still maintained at the village level especially. It's maintained throughout the society in some degree. But of course, Christianity and Islam and military dominance disrupts it, because now you're going to determine who's going to be the king or who's going to be the chief, in denial of the African process. Now, that didn't work in everywhere. The Africans meant to maintain their system in most of Africa, but their system lost the authority of society to the man with the gun, okay? But the power still lied in the hands of the woman to present the man as the authority, to deal with the man with the gun, you know? But that's coming back now. As we've removed the man with the gun, we have to deal with his Negro collaborators with the gun. And so we're beginning to move them out of the way and bringing back the authority of how to manage and rule an African community based on a Ma'atan principle that is granted by the women. And what I mean granted, the woman could be there competing with the men for it, but rather they said, listen, we got stuff we're supposed to do that y'all just can't do. And it's like raise the next generation based on the compassion and the laws of nature that will produce a healthy human being. That's a feminine phenomena. You're a manager, so we're gonna let you manage. We're gonna give you the authority to manage the community. But we gave you that authority, we can take that authority away from you. And so the way the rules and the symbols are in place, even if the king, like in Nigeria, the Oni of Ife, who's the king of all the Yorubas in the world, if he does wrong and his mama come out in front of that castle and rip her bra and put her breast to bare, everybody know his life as king is done. He's finished with that one act on the part of his mama or any other woman of authority and eldership. So we need to study a tradition that hasn't written itself, but is still oral. And I say an oral tradition is much more superior than the written tradition, because the written tradition is static. It acts like this is it, nothing can come, nothing can go. Whereas in the oral tradition, you still have the growth, you still have the expansion. A written tradition is more Setian if we were looking at Kemet, and an oral tradition is more Heruan in terms of contraction and expansion. The reason they tried to break up the family, because the family is the earliest building block in a civilized community. First, you gotta have an individual that's designed psychologically, spiritually, and morally based on the principles that we refer back to as Ahmad. Then that person try to find a partner so that they can replicate themselves that has the same kind of aspirations. And once you replicate yourself as your child, and you got the three, you got the family, then you're looking for another family unit to partner with so you can create a neighborhood. So you can carry out the food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security together. And then once you get that established, then you want to create a greater neighborhood, which is going to happen from your plain growth, called a community. But you want it to be created on the same fundamental principles. Well, the foundation block is the family unit. And if that cracks, the whole community is going to come down. So the attack is always at that building block. Destroy the building block and you destroy the community. So destroy the family. Use drugs, use prison, use crime, use whatever you can. Destroy that family. Deny educational access. Destroy that family. Deny access to employment. Destroy that family. Because if you destroy the family, you'll never get a community that could compete against us. After slavery, the chattel slavery after 1865, we exploded into the world as though we were never into slavery. Between 1865 and 1925, we had opened more than 2,000 schools. Imagine people can't read or write, but you're gonna go and open 2,000 schools and you're educating your babies. We had opened 75 banks and over 100 insurance companies coming up out of slavery. And we got the proof of it in our history. Great Sister Maggie Walker down in Richmond, Virginia. Her mama was born in slavery. She was birthed in slavery, but Maggie came out of slavery and built the biggest bank in the South, starting with the St. Luke's Penny Association, where every black man and woman put a penny in a jar. By the time the stock market crashed in '29, she had to bail the white banks in Richmond, Virginia out. What kind of mind is that? That's African. We never died in slavery. They didn't kill us. They didn't take everything from us, otherwise you and I wouldn't be sitting there having this discussion. They did break up the family as white people know family to be. They did not break up the family as black people know family to be. Because the white woman would have said, he took my child. The black woman would have said, they took our child. You understand? So whatever plantation that baby going to, the women is just waiting right there for her to be her mama. No questions asked. And that mama who just lost her baby is waiting there to take in the next child that is stole and sold from the other to be her mama and to be her daddy. And we practice family the way we practice family, not predicated on genetic and bloodline, but predicated on spirit and necessity. That child needs parents. That child needs love. I am parent. I am love. I belong to the child belongs to me. They cripple our ability to do a lot of things by denying us access to knowledge immediately, to capital immediately, to forming bonds and partnership immediately. We overcame all of that and any of that whenever the opportunity presented itself to us. Who civil rights movement? Who profited? Who gained? Okay. And in that, I would say it really wasn't our movement. This was basically a Jewish movement. We were fighting a freedom movement. The Jews were fighting a civil rights movement because they already had freedom, but they didn't have civil rights in much of the southern part of the country, just like we didn't. So it behooved them to put money up and finance and even loan some lives if they had to help us break the back of the South, so that they, with an overeducated population in the Northeast, could expand into the rest of the country. And they were very successful at doing that. But to keep us from profiting from what we had done, they created two simultaneous movements, one, the gay movement and the women's movement, and then began to identify themselves as us by switching our name from Negro or Black to minority, and then classifying these other elements as minority, who was entitled to the same privileges and rights that the black folks who had just fought this massive decades-long battle and died and so forth. Now everything that we had won, we have to share with these people who were always being given advantages over us. And that really hit a blow, but it went further than that. They began to vie for the spaces we had gained in institutions. ensure, like, well, if you're going to have a black studies department, then we want a women's studies department. If you're going to bring equality for blacks in the institution, you got to bring equality for women, which were then mostly white women, and for gays, which was at that point mostly white gay men and women. It really fractured the victory. So that when the so-called Civil Rights Bill was passed, where the concept of affirmative action is involved, the people taking advantage of affirmative action were white women. And when you lump in white Latinos and other non-white immigrants, black folks may be the ones who are getting maybe 10 to 15% of the affirmative action gains, even though we fought almost 100% for it. But while at the same time accusing us, even though the majority of food stamp goes to white families, the majority of welfare goes to white families, we're constantly being called the welfare hustlers, the welfare pimp, but they're the ones hustling welfare. They're the ones hustling food stamps because they have other opportunities that we don't have. They use welfare, which everybody in the country was getting. And that was money you put into the government. The government don't have any source of money except tax revenue. So that's the tax money out of your paycheck that they said, if you get into trouble, we're gonna save this money for you and this will help you survive till you get out of trouble and get back to work. But when it came to black people, they're saying, when you get into trouble, we'll give you this money, but you gotta break up the family. You can't be with your man. They didn't do that to white people. Okay. So they'd come into your house and see if there's any men's clothing there. Otherwise, they'll take you off the welfare. So if you're gonna take care of you and your children, it's to your advantage to help them, meaning the sister at this time, enforce as much as you cannot help yourself the dissolution of your family, just to eat. And after 40 to 50 years of that, much destruction was done to our family and our community. So by the 80s, when they attacked us with the crack attack, they realized we got to go back after that foundation block. You got to injure the family at the foundation level. But we survive even that. What we have to do, what the disruption in the socialization process has done, is not given us an opportunity to look at an African socializing model. We've only had the European socializing model to look at. It's fractured, it's broken, it's never been a whole. And what we're doing with this history and the study of history, restoration of memory, is trying to come up with an African socializing model and have models and examples that we can replicate that will lead to the harmony and the balance that we're looking for.